Infrastructure is crumbling and the problems are only getting worse. The pressure to find solutions is hot. Let's talk about why American cities have no water, no electricity, and no money to fix their infrastructure problems. Welcome to the Infrastructure Hot Seat Podcast, hosted by Chad Smeltzer.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Infrastructure Hot Seat Podcast. My name is Chad Smeltzer. I am your host. Today's guest is Allison Swisher, who is the Director of Public Utilities at the City of Joliet, Illinois. Thank you for joining me, Allison. How are you today?
Good. How are you doing, Chad?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. So, Allison, on our podcast, we talk about a lot of experiences, how you got into the industry. So we'll start off with, how did you get in the industry?
That's a really good question because when I was a little girl, I did not dream of working in the water and sewer industry. So I definitely had a desire to do something in the environmental field. And so being a very practical person in high school, I got a book on environmental careers, and environmental engineering was one of the options. And it looked like you could help the environment and make money. So
Right.
because my parents raised me right. So I got a degree in environmental engineering and still had plans to really focus my efforts on environmental type work. But then when I graduated, there weren't really jobs available in that field. So
Right.
my first job was with Metcalf and Eddy, which was, a civil engineering firm. And so on my first day, they said, "You're a civil engineer." And that kind of set that tone. But then I've kind of made my way since then into kind of getting into what I think I am more passionate about now, which is really local government and public administration. So that's kind of my path. So,
Well, it's a very interesting path in environmental engineering. You become an engineer, and was your goal is to help improve the environment? I take it that's what you
yeah, I was definitely a bugs and bunny kind of wanting to save all of the wildlife and everything. And I think I do that now in my job. A little bit more abstractly, really, than directly, doing that. But kind of got to go to the source and protecting people, with wastewater treatment, water treatment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're dealing with 23,000 to 72,000 overflows a year still in this country. That's
Mm-hmm.
reported by the EPA. So we do impact a lot of waterways where people are getting sick. They can't go out beaches, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it's definitely a place where we need people like you out there to help remediate these things and reduce the environmental impacts that we have
Yeah.
within our own communities. Is very important. So, what have you? Obviously, you're a woman in the industry. Uh, how long ago, when you got into the industry, you're the first woman, not the first woman in the industry, but you're a woman in the industry, a minority, right? And what were some of your experiences as you started getting into this more male-dominated area?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like the women before me were really the ones who trailblazed, that path. I fortunately have not had, I don't have that story of discrimination. I think other people do, and I do think, unfortunately, that people, women are faced with that, working in a male-dominated field. But when I was at school, there were more women in my engineering graduating class than there were men.
Yeah,
So I definitely think that women are becoming more prevalent, and I do think that the women who came before me, have get all that thanks for doing that.
yeah,
I know there's oftentimes I have had like a guy tell me that the only way I got into my current level in the profession was because I'm a woman and I had to fulfill some quota, which is crazy.
it is great.
So but it's something that I take with a grain of salt and
Yeah.
move forward with. But it's I don't sit around thinking about it every day. I just come to work and get my job done. So
Yeah, that's great. It's definitely changed over the last 2 decades. I've
mhm.
seen the trade shows. More women are coming into this space and really want to make a difference. And thanks for doing that, making that, trailblazer and also being a leader in this industry. Now,
Mhm.
you've taken on a big role as director of public utilities with a city that's been facing a lot of issues,
Yep.
water, for instance, and how have you been handling those kind of challenges?
Yeah, again, it's when I started in Joliet in 2013, and even at that time, like it wasn't really even on the radar that we had this monumental project, on the horizon. But, really in 2018, with the Illinois State Water Survey doing updated modeling, it was kind of in our face that like we were actually going to be running out of water, which is kind of crazy to think about in northeastern Illinois when like water is so plentiful that that would be something we'd have to deal with. So
Right.
it is, for Joliet, it is, the largest single project that the city will probably undertake, in the next hundred years. And so I know how transformational it is and how much of an impact it'll have on our residents. So, fortunately now we're working with 5 other communities in the region to make this a regional solution. And I do think in our industry we have to be thinking more that way of how can we benefit our residents, not only through saving money but just greater efficiencies by working together. So we got a great group of directors, mayors that we're working with on that project. But yeah, so by 2030 we'll have Lake Michigan water, in Joliet and the surrounding communities. So it's really really exciting. But it definitely takes a village to get this done. So we have multiple engineering firms, and we're just at the beginning of trying to really start engaging contractors because we know that we can really, they're the ones who have to get it done. So it's a team effort.
Yeah, that's a great way to segue into private public partnerships, right? With contractors as the government entity, and you need those contractors and the engineers to all come together and come up with a plan and design this massive project that you guys are putting
Yeah.
together. So kudos to you guys for doing that. How are you able to manage it? Because I would assume that's a lot of the challenges managing it.
Yeah,
Right?
well, fortunately, again, at Joliet, I have like fantastic staff. So I have, 3 deputy directors who have kind of taken the brunt of all the other activities going on in the city, which really allows me to be able to focus on, on this project. So I give all the credit to them. We're going this 600, $800 million project to, bring Lake Michigan water to Joliet is, we, as a side part of that, we have to replace all of our water mains that were constructed prior to 1970 to reduce our water loss. And so, I mean, that in itself is like a $300 to $400 million program that is being managed also. So it's just uh, the amount of effort that all of that takes, the level of coordination is it's significant to say the least.
I bet. So, how do you think we got into this situation? I wonder over the decades, like it seems like these things have popped up. It's like, oh wow, we really are running out. Like it's we got to go time now. We got to figure out a solution.
Yeah.
So I guess knowing what I know about infrastructure, it's getting older, right? We
Yeah.
didn't have a lot of data. We didn't have a lot of information. We were just kind of guessing at some of these or estimating a lot of this information. And now the city's in a critical spot where it needs water for its citizens and its communities. So, what do you think we could start doing better at managing our infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, when you look at all of the grades that you get for, infrastructure in the United States, it's, like C or below. And, especially for underground infrastructure, it's just, out of sight, out of mind. It's not like the sexy thing to spend money on, at least with like streets and that people get an instant gratification, oh, my street's paved. So I think it's a lot of education of elected officials. Really, they have to make those tough decisions about where limited resources get spent. But kind of like to what you alluded to, just having the ability to, with the technology now, to like track that, so you can make your case, like with asset management. I mean, that's something that in other countries people have been doing for years, and it's just something relatively new in the United States. So being able to go and say, look, repaired this water main 5 times in the last 5 years. If we would just replace it, we could save the city money. And so I think that is really, the future of trying to do that. So you don't get into this position where Joliet is now, where you're 50 years behind. We should have been replacing, if we'd only replaced water mains, at 1% a year, we wouldn't be having to make this huge investment. But I know that's hard to do, like I said, because it's not the exciting thing to do.
Right, but think about this. Infrastructure creates the communities, right? We have great infrastructure. You attract more business, which creates a bigger tax base, right, for
Yeah.
those communities. So if this is where education comes down to it, right? It's talking about it like we are now. If we can get those elected officials to start, understanding how infrastructure brings in growth to these communities, I think we're going to be in a much better position in the future for sure. So as you're growing this or putting together this massive project and getting water to your city, what other obstacles, because you have to deal with sewers and other utilities, what other challenges have you been facing at the same time as this project?
Yeah, so in Joliet, we also, we manage the water distribution, water treatment currently, sewer collection, and wastewater treatment. So, I mean, we have, that infrastructure is also aging. So we've put a lot of investment into the sewer system as well, in targeted areas where we knew we had issues. So, that program is ongoing as well. So I joke around with our guy in charge of the plants and say, we're going to have to expand one of our wastewater plants because Joliet's growing, and that's going to be about a $75 million project. But in relation to everything else going on, that's kind of like a side job, So we joke around about our $75 million side job that we hope we get to one day, just because there's so much other stuff going on.
Right, right. And then typically sewers are the last one to get fixed. I mean, water is more important, and sewers like, okay, well, that's great, but we'll get to it when we get to it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, Going into that, a lot of the engineering firms will come into cities, from my experience, and go to them and say, hey, you got to upgrade your wastewater treatment plant. That's number one. You got to meet, compliance with the
Yeah.
EPA, discharging, your effluent, blah blah blah. But do you think we really neglect the big elephant in the room, and that's the collection systems?
Yeah, of course. I mean, like, what's even less sexy than fixing a water main is probably fixing a sewer. So
Right.
it's I when I started my career, it was in wastewater and sewer collection, and so I kind of feel like that's always kind of like been my home, and where I'll, like, go back to, because I just think it's fascinating. The idea of trying to identify and fix this problem. And it's something I think that's been a challenge for all of us who've done that, just because you want to reduce the I, and you do one thing, and then did that really do anything? I don't know. So it's again, it's education. We have definitely started to actually see, like, the real world results of it. Of Mr. Smith's basement used to back up, and now it doesn't. So that's fantastic to be able to do that. But I feel fortunate in Joliet because we kind of were so late to the game that we've learned so much from other communities who kind of started before us. So I think just within the industry itself, there's been so many advancements in technology, and continue to be so, that it's exciting, I think, for collection systems in their future. So
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. I know you guys have been really proactive in fixing your sewer mains, and inspection and
yeah.
finding the problems before they become a big problem.
Yeah, it's interesting because Joliet, like I said, we used to have the approach of just completely reactionary. So we wouldn't do anything preventative at all, because, again, trying to find the money to do something until it was a problem was challenging. But it's kind of I'm so proud of where we've gotten to, because now we have other towns asking us, how do you do this? And I just think that speaks volumes to what public works is in general, is just being able to work with the other communities, and get their advice and just learn from what they've done. So
Yeah, yeah, that's great. How have you been, and you mentioned this at the beginning of our conversation, labor shortages and retiring. A lot of our staff, or, other cities that have the same issue is a lot of their staff are retiring. Now we
Hmm.
have this void, maybe a void, maybe not, of where everyone understands the collection system, the water system, like, and they're retiring, and now we have that knowledge just leaving. How
Hmm.
are you overcoming some of those challenges with people retiring?
Yeah, I mean, definitely succession planning in this industry has been a hot topic for a number of years, just because it's been really transitional about what the expectations are of our staff. Joliet has pretty much doubled in size, over the last 20 years, and the number of staff we have is honestly about the same. And
Okay.
so it is definitely asking more of everyone, and really trying to, again, turn to technology to help with that. I was just the other day telling some of our guys, like, it's great that you know that this valve is broken, this valve is broken, and this valve is broken, and so you can't use them. But if none of the rest of us know that, what good is it? So I'm like, I really need you to take the information in your brain and put it into GIS, because we have technology available now that we can keep track of these things. And so I think that has really been a shift in the industry, is to try and switch into that. We still have guys who want to carry around the paper maps, and I think they finally got to the point where the GIS is better data than the paper map.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, transitioning to technology is one of our biggest hurdles that we all have to overcome. And as technology comes into utilities, it'll only get better, right? And it'll only get easier, is the way I kind of see it playing out in the future with asset management systems and
yeah.
project management systems and stuff like that for the cities. And ideally, they should want to embrace it because it makes their job easier, right? I mean, if I can get out there, hit a couple buttons, and yeah, this thing's broken or not broken, that makes my life easier. I don't have to sit there on a paper, try and track the
Yeah.
piece of paper where it went. Did I lose it? Did I fold it up or throw it somewhere? Those kind of things that you have to deal with. So, as you're taking on this role, and how many employees do you have right now that you manage?
So within the Department of Public Utilities, we have about 80 employees.
80 employees. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So, what are your, you know, like a human resource side of things? Like, what are some of the biggest struggles you deal with on that side? Because you're managing a lot of people. How can you? What tools do you use to help you do manage those people?
Yeah, I mean, again, I would point to my staff, my other management staff, because they are fantastic at dealing
Yeah.
with that. So, I had a breakfast this morning for a group of retirees, and someone pulled me aside and was telling me about, well, so and so said this about me, and I didn't want to let you know it's not true. And I said, you know what, like, this level of drama, like, I don't need to be involved with. So
Right.
I said, and um, fortunately, that of course, when you work with people, there's bound to be drama, but for the most part, they do a good job of handling it at that level. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, there's always everything pops up, so it's.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I would assume that you deal with that a lot. It's just like always something. Hey, can this person, that person, this thing happened, that thing happened. You're just putting out fires, or just trying to manage the different fires that pop up throughout the day. Is what I envision you doing.
Yeah,
So
no, like I said, we try and stay pretty drama free, but I give all that credit to my other management staff
yeah,
who deal with the day to day issues when they pop up. So,
yeah, they do a great job buffering all that stuff,
oh
which is
yeah,
very important. It keeps you focused on what you need to do, and
right,
managing the utilities, make sure we don't have any issues, right, for the
yeah.
citizens. So okay, so we're fixing things, we're moving into technologies. Where do you see utilities going into the future? Like how are things in your perception of like what the future looks like?
That's a good question. I think it's I mean, basically, stuff flows downhill. You pump it, like the actual like mechanics of civil engineering is nothing really that is that changing. But I think a lot of push for wastewater treatment, for example, to go into the greener technologies and the energy efficiencies of being like net zero on energy usage. I think that is probably that they're doing that in Europe. They've been doing that in Europe for years, and right now, as energy costs have been so inexpensive, in the United States, especially in the Midwest, like there's really never been that cost benefit that you can justify doing that. But I do think as energy costs increase, you will see that will be a huge driver in this area to really push those types of projects forward. Um, yeah, I think just an overall, general awareness of other, sustainability type issues. I mean, I know in working on our program, that was one of the, you know, first things we wanted to make sure we had in place was a sustainability plan because, that's where you're getting the questions of, why are you going to spend this money to, have Lake Michigan water? What are the impacts? To the environment in doing that construction, and not only just the physical environment but the social environment as well. So I think when you come into this profession, you're kind of more like a you know a pure scientist and not so much of like a social scientist, but so much of what we do is engaging with the public and people, and so that's one thing you have to learn to do is try and really so many components, and be a PR person as well. You got to sell yourself, sell the industry to really get what you want or need to have accomplished.
Yeah, yeah. I hope that we get to the point where everything has sensors, right? And my ideal system would
Yeah,
be sensors everywhere. We can sit at a computer, have real time data. We can see how things are trending in water
yeah,
distribution, things are trending in sewer systems, and then we can make critical decisions faster that way. I think that that's going to be a huge, and it's going to happen. It's a matter of time. It's just
yeah, definitely.
to
Yeah.
that role where every manhole could have a sensor where it's telling us a lot of information, a lot of data about what's happening. So I think that's where we're going to see a lot of movement tech wise, and what that I think will do is help us with transparency.
Mhm.
I talked to some other engineers about this. It's like if we can show you the real time data of the water and sewer system and what it's doing and how it's functioning and how much it costs us to manage it and maintain it, right? It's going to make it easier for us to go back to the community constituents and say, hey, we need to increase our tax, our revenue to keep up with this
Yeah.
infrastructure because it's quickly falling apart. There's 50-year-old pipes, 100-year-old pipes in the ground still, and we're just trying to maintain it and survive at this point because we don't have enough budget money to keep up with it.
Yeah.
So if we keep investing, like you said, in technology and stuff, I think that's going to be a great place.
Hmm.
And you mentioned something to me before about transparency. It kind of goes in the contractor when we
Yeah.
hire contractors, things like that. What are some of the things in procurement that you're trying to do in Joliet to help understand things on the contractor and government side?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the exciting things that Joliet's finally going to be doing is moving to, e-bidding. So I'm very excited. I know that's not anything that new, but for us, it'll be a huge step just to make everyone's life a lot easier. The contractor, the contracting community as well as ours. One of
Yeah,
the things that we're facing as we move and been thinking a lot about is just confidentiality in
yeah,
bidding and how there is a lot of sensitivity to a lot of our construction documents and how that will need to be accounted for. And so I think that's a question that we are going to try and wrestle with
yeah,
in the next 6 months to a year to figure that out, because right now all of our documents are available to anyone who wants to go to the Joliet website,
right.
and is that okay? So
Yeah. No, and that's kind of obviously my wheelhouse. Of what I'm focused on is improving the infrastructure procurement process because we look at our water systems, our infrastructure, right?
mhm.
It's we're putting a lot of information out there for
Yeah,
everyone to understand. Oh, we're building a water treatment plant.
yeah,
That's just post the whole spec. I'm like, wait, what? What? That's the best way to understand how it was built, how to
right,
or maybe attack it. Who knows? Just some
Exactly. Yeah.
attacks, things that are happening now. Like, I see where we're going to need a more secure system down the road, and that's going to be important on the bidding side, the e-procurement side,
Hmm.
stuff like that. Now, you mentioned something sensitivity wise because I I want to elaborate a little bit more on that. What did you mean by the sensitivity of the contractors? Is it more on the pricing side, or what did you mean by that?
Um, I don't know if I really said, I don't know if I really mentioned the sensitivity of the
Okay,
contractors.
I misunderstood it, but yeah, yeah. I know the reason why I asked is because obviously we're trying to find qualified contractors, right, to
Yeah.
bid on this, and they have to get subcontractors, minority businesses to join them in their
Yeah.
opportunities. So, um,
I mean, definitely, like you said, with like the requirements that we have for, federal loans, state loans, there are a lot of, requirements that need to be followed in the bidding process. And so I think, what we're trying to find is how we can kind of reduce some of those barriers to really encourage as much interest in the project.
right,
I know sometimes like those requirements are a barrier or lead to higher costs. But I think they're going to be a reality for a lot of projects that need to get done, over the next 10 years that people are going to be relying on those funding sources. And there definitely are some strings attached,
yeah,
to that. And, that's one of my biggest concerns with this project in general is just not having enough contractors who are available to do the work.
right,
And I think that might be, trying to understand, what are some of their barriers. Is it, to bidding on the work would be good. And we've already started to try and do that. So
yeah. Yeah, because you got a contractor and a workforce issue out in the private sector right now. That's
mhm.
nobody wants to get in a manhole. That nobody's going down or digging in, wants to get dirty anymore. I
Yeah,
think there was a report of all the, a lot of people at home just not working. They're not in the workforce anymore. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, that's a lot. I think it was 5 million, 6 million people, something like that. It's
yeah,
amazing to me. I guess we're all doing TikToks or something. I don't know, but it's just one of those things. Uh, so going back to like technology and moving into e-procurement and moving into uh, making utilities more efficient and things like that. What are some of your, I guess, maybe this gets a little political, but the challenges of getting your leadership to make decisions? What are some of the challenges you face with that? I know you obviously have to convince them, but do you have to show them? What things do you do to help your leadership understand what your problems are?
yeah. I mean, it's when you're running out of water, there's not much more selling that you need to do. I mean,
Yeah,
the Joliet City Council has been so supportive of this initiative. I mean, the mayor himself was kind of the first person who came out and said, "We're going to form a task force. We're going to solve this problem. We're not going to kick the can down the road any further." So, that one I don't want to say is easy when you're spending $800 million, but it definitely doesn't need as much explanation. I think a lot of the other items where it sounds nice to do, like some of the more environmental or sustainability driven projects. Those are harder. And I think, in Joliet, until you can show that there's going to be cost savings,
right.
then there's interest, but I think that is something that will take take time for doing that. But I think I've had a lot of support on the programs. Like I said, switching from being reactionary to proactive, has been, I think, a huge mindset change in Joliet, and I've had the support of the council to
Yeah,
do that. But a lot of that was driven because we had residents who had sewers that were backing up, or their water main had broken 5 times, in a year in front of their house. So sometimes the public, you don't like receiving their phone calls when they're yelling at you, but you can definitely use it to your advantage then to find the solution.
yeah. No, it makes total sense. So, what would you? Oh, we got a couple more minutes left.
Okay.
What would you say to the young professionals? trying to get into this industry. And I know you're active. You're now the president of the APWA Chicago
Yeah,
chapter now. Awesome. Congratulations on
thank
that.
you.
And how would you encourage people to get more involved in those type of organizations and get involved in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say do it, get involved. I mean, there's so many opportunities to get involved, multiple associations. I think, make sure, there's a lot of companies that see a lot of value in their staff doing that. I think also for, people just getting into the profession, I know there's a lot of opportunities to work from home, but I would say, this industry is so relationship based and you don't develop a relationship, on a camera. You really need to get out there and see people and, learn from them. And so like, as enticing as it might be to want to stay home every day, I think it's so important to go out there, go into the office, work with senior people, go to events, and yeah. And I mean, for me, being part of APWA has been such a huge part of my career. Just the people I've met, the relationships I've formed. I know if I have an issue in Joliet, I could call probably 20 people
Yeah.
who would help me with, how do they do it in their town, and it's just really love that community that we have in public works. So
Yeah, that's awesome to have because it's tough being alone trying to make decisions.
yeah.
You
And you
need
don't
to-
have to be. There are plenty of people who want to help. So
yeah, no, that's great. So, well, thank you, Allison, for joining me on the podcast.
yeah, no problem.
This is great. And is there anything you would like to share other than just what we talked about?
Yeah, no. Thanks for the opportunity,
Yeah.
Chad. This was great.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll be able to talk soon down the road, maybe sometime later in 2023. Thanks,
All right,
Allison.
sounds good. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Infrastructure Hot Seat Podcast. We hope that this show brought you some insight on relevant topics within the infrastructure world. Please join us every 2 weeks on Tuesday for the next episode. If you're interested in being a guest on this podcast, please set up a 15-minute interview with your host at calendly.com/Chad Smeltzer.